Hey, what's going on, everybody? I wanted to talk about why Illinois sucks so much and why I decided to move to Arizona. And, I'm sure those of you that live in Illinois, if you're watching this, can sympathize with me and probably want to leave yourself. But if you live in another state, if you're thinking about moving to Chicago or moving to Illinois, I would say definitely don't do it because Illinois is in pretty bad shape. I really don't like it for a number of reasons. I have no desire to ever go back there again. I'm sure I'll have to. Pretty much everybody in my family's married off, but there's a lot of baby boomers are in their late 60s, early 70s, are probably going to pass away quite a bit and dropping off in the next, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. I guess I'll have to go back there for that if I want to be seen as an honorable family member. Hopefully, won't have to go back there in the wintertime. So here it goes. I'm going to go over the reasons why I hated Illinois so much, pretty much all my life, and why I decided to move to Arizona. Now, just to touch briefly, I don't know, Chicago has had a lot of corrupt politicians over the years. I mean, we've imprisoned, 3 governors. Rod Blagojevich, I mean, he's still in prison. I think it was 5, he got sentenced to 14 years in prison for trying to sell Obama's Senate seat. And I forget what year, it was, probably at least like 5 years ago, but he got sentenced to 14 years in prison. And then there was another governor in the early 2000s, George Ryan, that did some prison time. And Dennis Hastert, the former Speaker of the House, that was actually convicted. I guess when he was a basketball coach, however many years ago, he was convicted of molesting or sexually assaulting children. And there was also another governor, I don't remember what his name was, back in 85 or 86. He did something, he got involved in some type of corruption, and he ended up doing prison time too. So yeah, we do have, and then I heard no jail time or prison time, but like our mayor, like Raheem Emanuel, he's the mayor now. He used to be at the White House during the Obama era, I think during his first term, Raheem Emanuel. And then before that, we had Richard Daley, and supposedly the Daleys were involved in a lot of corruption over the years too. And the road, compared to Arizona, I mean, the roads are just, so that's the politics. And then as far as everything else I'm going to go over, the roads are just terrible in Illinois, especially driving in the right lane. It's just constantly, there's just, especially in the wintertime after the winter's over with, the snow and ice being on the road for, months on end from it being so cold, getting so much traffic, you get a lot of potholes and cracks, and the roads, just are, most parts of Illinois, are just terrible. It takes, so long for them. I guess, roads have to be resurfaced every 15 years, but it doesn't really seem like it happens that often. It seems like the roads have to go to complete shit before they actually start to, take some action and get them fixed. And there was one tollway. I get to the tolls too, but there was a tollway, the Ronald Reagan tollway. I think it's also called the Northwest I-88. And that goes east. It's also called the East-West Tollway, but that tollway is always like under construction. It's like every 5 years. It's like they'll do something, and then it's like, like, okay, this isn't this traffic pattern. It's like the engineering doesn't work out, and even though it's in good condition, I guess the engineering, the traffic pattern just doesn't work out the way they like. So it's like another 5 years. It's like, oh, you're later after that original construction, and they're doing something else. And then 5 years later, they're doing something else. And it's not like they're really making any progress with it seems. And then the tolls, for so many years, it used to just be 40 cents. Now it's gotten so expensive. I think back in was it 2004, maybe 2003, all of a sudden it went up to double. It went up to like 80 cents. I'm not sure what it is out of pocket now, but it's gotten so expensive to the point where everybody has what's called like an iPass. It's basically like a prepaid. You just purchase it from the Illinois Tollway, whatever it's called, commission or something like that. And I forget how much it is, a couple $100. I mean, you get your money's worth out of it, but yeah, it's just a couple hundred, or is it like a, yeah, I forget how much it is, but I mean, you definitely get if you don't use a tollway a lot, especially if you use it going to work, you'll definitely get your money's worth. I really didn't use it a whole lot, but Yeah, it's basically a prepaid pass, and you just there's got glue strips on it. You just put on your windshield. You don't have to go through the toll booth. You just pass through the iPass lanes, like 3 or 4 lanes, so that makes it easier. But yeah, they did. I know, yeah, years ago they did double it. I'm not sure how much you have to pay out of pocket now. I think it's probably more than 80 cents. And Illinois, I think, is the only state that still has tolls. And to touch back into politics, one thing I did forget to mention, I think this was last year I heard about this in 2017, but yeah, supposedly Illinois, I mean, we all know we have to budget, a business has to budget, a household, you have to budget. More than likely, if you don't, if you don't know where your money's going, you're going to run into trouble. You're going to, more than likely, if you're not being responsible with your money, I mean, unless you're like, really dirt cheap, but most people aren't. But yeah, if you don't know where your money's going, if you don't have some type of plan as to how to spend it, more than likely you're going to end up getting into trouble sooner or later because if you don't have like an emergency fund set up, for a rainy day, you're always going to have unexpected expenses, whether it be medical or, car breaking down or, what have you. You need some new clothes. There's always going to be unexpected expenses. I say I don't know how people, I know some people live from paycheck to paycheck, with their mortgage, their bills, their rent, whatever. But it's like that's not including the unexpected expenses. I don't know if they have a lot. I don't know if they have a lot of debt and credit cards because I never had the guts to ask them. And it's like I always oftentimes wonder. I was like, what the hell you do? I mean, obviously, you live in paycheck to paycheck with your planned expenses, but it's like if something unexpected comes up, if you have like a car repair or a medical bill, it's like, how do you end up paying for it? Or a home repair, that's one other thing I was forgetting to mention. And so getting back to that, supposedly I heard last year that Illinois has been operating without a budget for the last 2 years. If that's still the case, that'd be 3 years by now. But I would hope that they have a better head on their shoulders at this point. But I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't. And mainly it's the weather in Illinois. It's just so unpredictable. It's just terrible most of the time. I mean, you get some nice days that are just heavenly. We feel so good to be alive, but very rarely does it happen. And I'll go through each month. So January is fucking cold. It's usually the coldest month of the year. The one good thing about January, usually, even though it's so cold, for some reason, like when it's real cold like that, it doesn't snow as much, if at all. So January, you usually, even though you get the sub-zero temperatures, you usually don't get a lot of snow, if any. It's usually February. It warms up a little bit in February, even though it's still pretty cold. But February is my experience is usually the snowiest month, and sometimes even March is usually still pretty cold too. You can get, I mean, I've seen snow in May and June, but yeah, March, usually the last 10, 15 years I lived there, we got snow in March too, accumulations. And usually by, sometimes it happens in March, usually by April you're done with snow, but, then it gets so, and so, it gets warm in March. If it's not snowing in March, it's raining and it's still really cold and windy, gloomy. Same thing with April. April and May, or even May can still be pretty cold. It usually takes until about June before. I mean, you get your warm days here and there in April and May. Sometimes even March if you're lucky. But it's so usually March, April, May are still so rainy and chilly. And it usually takes until about June before it gets warm consistently. And, summer can be kind of inconsistent too. Usually July and August are the hottest months, but I've seen it the other way around. I've seen it where, June is the hottest month, and, July and August are kind of cool. You never really know how it's going to go. And same thing with the rain too. You get some summers and they're so rainy where you're mowing your lawn like every 2 or 3 days because the grass is just growing so damn fast. But yet you get some summers where, you get droughts, it hardly rains at all. And, your lawn, and, you have to mow it like once a month, and it's, practically getting burned out, turning brown. 2005 was a real dry summer. That was one of the driest summers I remember in Chicago, and I did lose quite a bit. I think I had grubs too, but I did lose because the front of my yard faced south, and I was working, so, I mean, it was a dry summer. My lawn might have survived if I had water, but I was working so many hours, working 2 jobs. I was working like 65, 70, sometimes 80 hours a week, so I was like never home. And the girlfriend I had at the time was pretty much useless. She lazy ass, didn't do any housework at all, so I couldn't count on her to water at all. So I did end up, it was such a dry summer, and like I was never home to water. You know, every time I was home, I was usually sleeping. So I didn't have a lot of free time, and I lost probably about 2/3 of my lawn in front, and then about a third of my lawn in back. And it was a big mess the next spring of 2006. And to replace all that, I had to pull the grass up to expose the soil. Then I had to put new seed down, and I also put down the stuff. I put some hay down, which retains moisture, and I also put down this stuff called lawn patch. And I had to do a lot of watering. Luckily, the next summer, 2006, when I remember, it was pretty rainy, so my lawn came back pretty quickly, pretty easily. It just took probably about 4 or 5 years to completely fill in, until that 5 years passed, until like, because that was 2005, that wasn't until 2010. Up until that point, you could see the patches where, the lawn was newer and the lawn was older. So yeah, that's how the summer goes. In the summertime, it's really high humidity there too. Even if it's not raining, the mosquitoes are terrible because mosquitoes love humid, damp environments. And even if it's not raining, compared to Arizona, I mean the humidity is so high, and we actually had a heat index in Illinois where it could be like 70 degrees, but then the heat index, it can make it feel like it's 85 or 90. And it's not like a comfortable dry heat. It's, I don't know, just being humid, feeling like soaking wet like that, like you just came out of like like a sauna or whatever. It's a steam room, I guess, is more the better term I'm looking for. But that's just not a comfortable feeling to me. I just don't like that type of feeling. And so yeah, the summers are, normally the mosquitoes are so bad, and you got the humidity to deal with. And September is actually the best month in Chicago because it starts to cool down, and I like sun. September, that's the other thing about Chicago is you get so many. You get sunny days, you get cloudy days, but it seems like there's so many more cloudy days than sunny. And even the sunny days, it's like very, out in west, in Arizona, you get so many days where it's sunny, not a cloud in the sky. But it's like very rarely, like even the sunny days in Illinois, it's still like there's always clouds in the sky, always. It's still, partly cloudy usually. It's just, I depend on sunlight. If I don't get enough sunlight, just gloomy days make me so depressed. I can never live in Seattle or, Portland. I actually have one friend, I don't know, she's really light skinned. She's actually Mexican, but she's like lighter skinned than I am. And I imagine she sunburns pretty easily, but yeah, she said that's her dream. I guess she loves Seattle, and it's her dream, like, to move there eventually. But I can't imagine. It just is. It's always. It never gets really that hot there. It never gets that cold, which is kind of a nice thing. Same thing with Oregon, but it's gloomy, and I've never been there, but just from what I've heard, and just looking at the weather, it's just always raining and always cloudy, and sometimes they get snow there. I wouldn't like that at all. I'd be so depressed. Sean Kemp, the former NBA star, played for the Seattle Supersonics when they existed. They actually called him he was a great player. They called him the Rain Man for that reason. I guess they also called him the Rain Man because he wanted to play for Seattle. He loved the rain. So I don't get that. That's definitely not for me. And we got to get back to September in Illinois. September is really a good month in Illinois because it's mild. It's usually in the 70s, like clockwork, and you usually get a lot of sunny days and very little rain. Yeah, September was always my favorite month, and sometimes October can be a good month too. If it does, sometimes October it gets cold, but a lot of times October can be nice too, sunny and still pretty warm, and sometimes even November. But I do remember one Halloween, like I think back in 2014, 2015, just a few years ago. It was Chicago really is, it's not, there's no joke. They call it the Windy City. It is always really pretty windy there all throughout the year. And there was one Halloween, it was like 30 degrees, and snow, but it was 30 degrees and so damn windy. I never remember a Halloween that cold in Illinois. A lot of kids weren't going out, and even the kids that were going out, they weren't staying out for too long that year. That was pretty bad. And but yeah, the wind, I don't know, I think you play golf, but I'm just not a good, Arizona is much more suitable to my golf game. I hate playing golf in the wind. I've never been a good wind player. Like, whenever we used to go out, I guess kind of negative thinking, but it's like whenever it was windy, I just knew that I was going to have a shitty round, that I wasn't going to be playing very well because wind just throws my game off. The swing, you have to have a good balance, and you have to be able to control your club. And I always felt like wind was throwing out. I wasn't able to keep my balance right, and I always felt like the wind was kind of grabbing my club. On the when I reached the top of my backswing, I always felt like I just didn't have as much control. And you got to be really a good judge too. You have going into the wind, you have to use more distance, and going with the wind, less distance, and sometimes even so, you just cannot, especially on fast greens, depending on the slopes too, when you underclub, you hit the ball short, but it just keeps running. It won't stop. It won't stop. And, the crosswinds, that's another thing. It seems like if you hit the ball straight, the crosswinds don't really, where it's going left to right or right to left. It seems like if you hit the ball straight, you don't have like any sideways spin in the ball. It seems like the ball still goes straight, but man, if you slice it, and the wind's blowing from left to right, it just seems like the wind just multiplies it by like 4 or 5. And same thing with hooking, if the wind's blowing from right to left, and if you have side spin, you hook the ball right to left spin, it just seems like it's multiplied by like 4 or 5. It's just so much harder to judge. I always shoot really good scores where there's no wind, and it's just so much easier to keep my balance, so much easier to judge. So, and then, yeah, even November is usually pretty cold. Sometimes you get some warm days, but yeah, like usually by Thanksgiving, it's always cold out. And November is actually one of, October too, usually pretty gloomy, but I think on record over the years, November has the reputation of being one of the cloudiest months in Illinois. And December, sometimes you get some warm days, but yeah, December is usually pretty cold too. And December used to be a lot snowier. It seems like I know they got hit pretty bad last year, but it seems like the last 10 years, Decembers have been kind of non-existent with snow. Not too many. I know a lot of people like a white Christmas. A lot of people say they like the snow for December, but then after New Year's, they're done with it. They're ready to be over with it. It never happens. But yeah, the last 10 years, Illinois hasn't really gotten much snow in December. I know they got hit pretty hard. They had a really bad winter last year. And then there was one more thing I wanted to go over. It's not really coming to my mind at the moment. But that's what I was going to talk about was the prices. I mean, the wages are just as high out here as they were back in Illinois. But the taxes, the house prices, the rent is just so much more expensive. And, a lot of people pay like, for a nice house in the suburbs, some people I know pay like $10,000 a year for taxes. And I mean, if you got a mortgage that's $1,000 a month, that's, $12,000 a year. And if your taxes are an extra, if you got, taxes are $10,000 a year, that's almost like a second mortgage payment. That's just crazy. And my wife and I back in Illinois, I mean, we had a small townhome. It was a 2-bedroom townhome, like 1,200 square feet. And the taxes on it were like $4,500 a year. And I think they just went up every year. It was kind of a growing area. And then, they built a new library, new fire department, new police department, more and more schools. So that, the taxes, they kept going up. They were kind of affordable when we first moved in. Yet, they just kept going up and up every year. It probably won't be too much longer before the taxes in that townhome will be close to $10,000. And my wife and I out here, we got a home that's 2,700 square feet, a lot bigger, like 3 times bigger. And we're only paying like $1,600, $1,700 a year for taxes. So, that right there is just huge. You can get so much more for, depending on the area. I mean, we live in Phoenix suburbs, about 45 minutes southeast. It's more, any city's expensive. It's more expensive when you get towards the city. But we're out in the suburbs. But yeah, I mean, compared to Illinois suburbs, you can just get so much more for your money. And so yeah, I talked about the weather. The wind, the humidity, and just the inconsistent weather. It's like you could just never account. Sometimes it could be really nice in the morning, and all of a sudden the weather turns to shit. In the late morning, early afternoon, and then sometimes it can be crappy, and you don't plan to go out and do anything, and then all of a sudden it clears up. It's like, oh man, I could have gone, if I'd known it was going to clear up, I could have gone out and played golf. So yeah, I mean, there was a lot of I always kind of worried going to football games and baseball games. Always kind of worried that they get postponed or canceled. It's happened a lot at Cubs and Sox game. Never happened to me. I think there was one Cubs game I went to where it was actually thundering and lightning. I was really surprised because the game was official. I think, yeah, what was it, after 5.5 innings or so, like the game's official and the Cubs were winning and saw a strike of lightning. I thought for sure that they were going to, I think the Cubs were up by like 3 runs. I thought it was official at that point, and I thought that they would call off the rest of the game and, just give the Cubs the win, but they ended up playing the full 9 innings. And, a lot of people, it's expensive. A lot of people are attracted to Chicago for the jobs and the high incomes, which, the incomes are pretty high. More thoughts are coming to mind, more things I left out. The incomes are, pretty high if you work in Chicago, but the thing is, it's so expensive to live down there. And then if, a lot of people do live in the suburbs and commute, but then, if you commute, the traffic is just absolutely terrible in Chicago. And, a lot of people take the train or they take the subway, the L station, but you got to pay for that too. And that can be a mess, especially during, certain events like, the Taste of Chicago, or when the last time, 2015, the Blackhawks won the Stanley Cup. And they had a huge rally in downtown Chicago, and a lot of people were going to work. It was during a weekday, and a lot of people couldn't get to work because the train was just passing by. They didn't have any more room. All the train cars were filled to capacity, so they didn't bother stopping because they're at maximum capacity for each cabin, each car. They couldn't get any more people on there. So yeah, even in the suburbs, it is pretty expensive. And oh my God, in the wintertime, because like Chicago is, I've been down there several times in the winter, and it is just absolutely brutal. In the wintertime it's so cold, even in the suburbs. But oh my God, Lake Michigan is huge, and the downtown skyline is like right along Lake Michigan. Lakeshore Drive, and it is just that lake breeze. It is absolutely brutal in the wintertime, let me tell you. And with the skyline, the wind just kind of goes through the buildings. Just kind of flows through the buildings like an air chute. It is just terrible. You almost feel like you're getting sucked into an air chute. It's just unbelievable. And that wind. The summers are pretty brutal out here, but I'll take that over the cold any day. Sometimes it gets so cold and windy that it hurts your face. Like my cheeks get all red, especially if it's frozen rain or snow. Sometimes it's the wind chill, the wind speed, 30, 40 mile per hour wind speed. It hits your face. It almost feels like you're getting stuck with a knife, and that's how much it can hurt. And there's sometimes, like I said, some summers there's droughts, and then we've had, there's always, the possibility, every summer seems to be the opposite. You get one summer as a drought, and then the next summer you get so much rain that you're mowing your lawn every 2 or 3 days. And it seems like every, at least from what I can remember, it's like every 10 years there's like major flooding in Chicago, and that's not fun to have to go through at all. Losing the possessions, your bank or your basement floods over. That's definitely not fun. No, definitely glad I don't have to worry about that in Arizona. And there's another thing I don't have to worry about in Arizona. Illinois. There's just about all the Midwest. There's always that risk of tornadoes, and I was fortunate to never have been in one. There was actually a major, probably one of the worst tornadoes ever hit the Chicago area. It was about 40 minutes south of me when I was a child, and I was like 11 years old. That was back in 1990, and I was kind of worried about that because I never had a fear of tornadoes because I always thought the ones in Illinois were pretty mild. I thought those, big F5 tornadoes that just happened in Nebraska and Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas. But then when that happened, just half an hour, 40 minutes away from me, I got freaked out by tornadoes for a while. I'm like, oh my God, because I think that the supercell thunderstorm that led to that tornado, I remember that day pretty well. And it could have easily touched down in my town because I do remember that day there was a tornado warning and or a severe thunderstorm warning, and I do remember that supercell thunderstorm. It actually went over us, over our town, and then it actually had produced a tornado a little bit north of us, about an hour and a half north of us. It was a mild one, didn't last too long, and it went back up, but then the supercell continued down to the south, and that produced an F5 tornado about 40 minutes south of us. So yeah, there's a lot. I mean, no place is heaven. Like my grandma used to say, no place is heaven except for the real heaven. But as far as I can say, my 1 year experience in Arizona, I mean, it's definitely not perfect out here. I have issues with Arizona, just like with anywhere. But yeah, I gotta say, this is as close to heaven as I have ever been, I've ever felt, being in Illinois all my life for 38 years. And yeah, I think the last thing I wanted to touch on was the taxes, kind of more political. Like I said, Illinois has been operating without a budget for, supposedly the last 2 or 3 years. And, some people are thinking that the rest of the country might end up taking a, fall tag. Illinois, it sounds like they're on the verge of bankruptcy, may have to be bailed out. And I'm hoping it doesn't get to the point where we end up having to bail out Illinois, because with the exception of Hawaii, I think Hawaii is like the most expensive state to live in. So not counting Hawaii, I think like California, Illinois, New Jersey, which I don't know why New Jersey would be so expensive to live, but yeah, I guess those three states have like the highest living expenses, the highest taxes. And the other thing too is Illinois has actually a lower hourly wage than Arizona. Minimum wage is 10 an hour, whereas back in Illinois, I think it's still like only 8.25 or 8.50. So yeah, I was kind of shocked. I thought the minimum wage would be less than like 8.25 out here, but it's actually 10 an hour. So yeah, I think I covered everything I wanted to cover, and I'll see you all next time with another video. Take care, everybody, and once again, thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. I'm thankful for all my viewers and subscribers. Let's keep the ball rolling. Keep it coming. Thanks again.